Well, gun control has always been a lightning rod issue in American politics, and the right to bear arms in the Constitution, well, it's become a central focus in the 2024 presidential race. Generally, Democrats have always called for stricter gun control measures, but the message seems to be a little different this year. Kamala Harris is actually boasting that she's a proud gun owner. She even told Oprah Winfrey, quote, "If somebody breaks into my house, they're getting shot." That's not something you regularly hear from a Democrat candidate. But Harris's tough talk aside, the outcome of this election could determine the future of gun laws in America, but not before the National Rifle Association has its say. The NRA has about 5 million members, and its influence over the political process has been legendary. Let's bring in the president of the NRA, longtime friend, and in fact, a fraternity brother, Bob Barr. Previously, Bob was a longtime Republican congressman from Georgia. He also was the Libertarian Party's presidential nominee in 2008. Bob, let's get into it. Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, they publicly talk about owning guns. Walz recently claimed that no one is coming for your guns. Yet we watched him fumble around with a shotgun looking more like Elmer Fudd the first time he ever held one. Do you believe Kamala Harris and Tim Walz when they say no one's coming for your guns?
Thanks, Governor. It's wonderful to be with you. I don't believe them any more than I believe that Kamala Harris believes in the free market. Kamala Harris, in particular, has a demonstrated long history, public history of anti-Second Amendment stances that she has taken. So, for her to glibly come out on Oprah and say, "Oh, I own a gun and I'll use it," is just nonsense. I don't believe it, and I don't think very many voters will believe it either, to be honest.
You know, it seemed like such a missed opportunity for the interviewer when she made this comment about "I own a gun" to say, "Oh, really? Well, tell me, what kind of gun is it, and how many shells does it hold in the magazine, and is it a semi-automatic? Is it a revolver? Tell us about your gun so we can learn more about what you have and why you have it, and how often you still go to the range and shoot it." But they've never followed up on that. So I'm not sure that the media is holding Kamala Harris or Tim Walz in any way accountable for their gun ownership. But, they strut Walz out there dressed up like he just left the Orvis retail store. But honestly, I think that kind of blew up in his face. It was like the shell never left the barrel, because he couldn't figure out how to unload the doggone thing. I mean, it was an embarrassment.
It should be an embarrassment, but I'm not sure that it really is, because these people are so clueless about the real world that they're trying to reach out there. Governor, despite the various stances and anti-firearms policies that Kamala has pushed over the years, from mandatory gun buybacks to outlawing the AR-15 rifle platform and so forth, the most disturbing thing about her on the Second Amendment is the fact that she has written a public brief back when she was the district attorney in San Francisco that states the Second Amendment does not protect an individual right. So if you sort of start from there, you can see very quickly how frightening the philosophical underpinning, or lack thereof, that this individual, Kamala Harris, has. The Bill of Rights, as a group and individually, protect individual rights. That's the whole point of it. Yet she does not believe that the Second Amendment protects an individual right.
The economy is uncertain. You never know whether your money's worth as much today as it was yesterday. It's one of the reasons I buy gold from American Hartford Gold. American Hartford Gold has earned a 5-star rating and an A+ from the Better Business Bureau. Be sure to tell them Mike Huckabee sent you. They'll give you up to $15,000 of free silver on your first qualifying order. Call 844-417-1010 or text Mike to 998899. You'll be glad you did business with American Hartford Gold. I think the Supreme Court has been pretty clear, even in recent rulings, that it is an individual right. Uh, if I'm not mistaken, the Heller ruling was one of those that affirmed that people do have a right to own a firearm, that the government may put some restrictions on it. That would be another debate. But this idea that we don't have a right, I think it's been pretty much settled law, as attorneys like to say.
It is. The seminal case, as you indicated, Governor, was back in 2008 with the Heller decision out of the District of Columbia. And then we had just 2 years later, the McDonald case out of Chicago that expanded that ruling in Heller that had to do with the District of Columbia. It expanded it broadly. So there really is no room for legitimate debate anymore about whether the Second Amendment protects an individual right. But she just blithely goes on and on now, despite being on record as saying it doesn't protect an individual right, apparently believing that her individual right still exists. It's a little bit laughable, too, Governor. As you know, the vice president lives in a very secure compound in Washington, D.C., on the grounds of the U.S. Naval Observatory with fences and all sorts of security, and including Secret Service protection. So this charade that she owns a gun and would use it is absolutely comical on its face. But her stance on the Second Amendment is not comical. It's very dangerous, and it would be devastating to have that sort of person occupy the seat of power that comes with the presidency of the United States.
You know, there's a lot of, and I just would use the word ignorance about firearms when I hear people talk about assault weapons. I'm particularly just amused by it because I'm thinking, my gosh, a pencil in my hand stuck in the jugular of a person attacking me is as much an assault weapon as anything else. But it's popular to use the term, let's ban assault weapons. As president of the NRA, how do you push back against people who say things like, ban the assault weapons, because they must assume that a lot of Americans have no clue what they're talking about, and therefore would say, yeah, that'd be a good idea.
It has a lot of surface appeal, the same as, oh, let's have universal background checks. Who could argue with that? Well, the fact of the matter is that universal background checks would deeply infringe on an individual's right to keep and bear arms, because you couldn't freely provide a firearm to somebody without going through the government. And once you open that gate to require government approval, then it becomes an arbitrary exercise of government power. But the term assault weapon, I've dealt with this as you have for years in government, and myself as a lawyer. It carries with it a very negative connotation. The fact of the matter is that the AR-15 rifle, which is the most popular rifle in the United States of America, is not an assault rifle. It is not capable, unless it is unlawfully modified, of firing automatic. And for Governor Walz to call it a weapon of war that he carried in war is also nonsensical. Because our military, when they go into combat, they carry fully automatic firearms. Otherwise, they'd be at a terrible disadvantage with regard to our adversaries. But the answer to your question, Governor, is when people hear the term assault rifles and let's ban them, all of us, both in the NRA and not in the NRA, have an obligation as citizens to correct the record and make sure that if we're being interviewed and that term is used or misused the way it is so frequently, to correct people.